The wind carried dust and desperation through the Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1878, and Georgia Foster stood at the edge of Ogden with nothing but the clothes on her back and a silver locket pressed against her palm, knowing this moment would either save her life or mark her final surrender to a cruel world that had taken everything else from her. She had walked for 3 days straight after the stagecoach driver left her behind when she could not pay the remaining fare. Her feet ached inside boots, worn thin at the soles, and her throat felt like sandpaper despite the creek water she had drunk that morning. The dress she wore, once a respectable navy blue, now bore the stains of travel and hardship. At 22 years old, Georgia had already buried her parents, lost her family farm to debt collectors, and watched her younger brother ride off to seek fortune in the California gold fields, never to send word again. The locket in her hand had belonged to her mother, passed down from her grandmother before that. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, painted with care, showing her parents on their wedding day. It was the last thing of value she possessed, and as she stood looking at the weathered sign that read Ogden, Wyoming Territory, population 247, she knew she would have to part with it. The main street stretched before her, flanked by wooden buildings that leaned slightly, as if tired from standing against the constant wind. A general store, a saloon, a blacksmith shop with smoke rising from its chimney, and at the far end, what appeared to be a boarding house with a hand-painted sign that read Rooms Available. Georgia forced her legs to move, each step deliberate despite the exhaustion that threatened to topple her. She passed a few townspeople who glanced at her with curiosity mixed with suspicion. Strangers were common enough in the West, but a woman alone, clearly at the end of her resources, was cause for concern or gossip, depending on one's disposition. The boarding house proprietor was a stern woman named Mrs. Hutchinson, who looked Georgia up and down with shrewd eyes that had seen too many hard luck stories to be moved by sympathy alone. "I need a room," Georgia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just for a few nights while I find work." $2 a week, paid in advance, Mrs. Hutchinson replied, crossing her arms. "Meals are extra." Georgia opened her palm, revealing the locket. The silver caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. "I can give you this. It is worth more than 2 weeks' room and board." It is solid silver with real painted portraits inside. Mrs. Hutchinson picked up the locket, examining it with a practiced eye. She opened it, looked at the tiny paintings, then closed it with a decisive snap. "It will cover 2 weeks. That is all I can offer. Times are hard for everyone." Georgia knew the locket was worth far more, but she also knew she had no leverage for negotiation. "I will take it, thank you. Room 3 upstairs. No visitors, no noise after dark, and you are responsible for your own washing. There is a pump out back, Mrs." Hutchinson handed her a key and pocketed the locket without ceremony. The room was small and sparse, containing only a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a single window that overlooked the dusty street. Georgia sat on the bed and allowed herself, for the first time in days, to stop moving. Her body trembled with exhaustion, and tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. She had traded her last possession for shelter. 2 weeks to find work, to find a way forward, or she would be right back where she started, with nothing and nowhere to go. After washing her face and hands with water from the pitcher on the washstand, Georgia straightened her dress as best she could and went back downstairs. She needed to begin looking for work immediately. Every moment mattered. The general store owner, a balding man with spectacles, shook his head before she finished asking. "Sorry, miss. My wife helps me run the place. Do not need anyone else." The saloon keeper laughed outright. I've got bar girls and you do not look the type. No offense meant. The blacksmith barely looked up from his work. This is a one-man operation. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Georgia felt hope slipping away. She stood outside the general store trying to formulate a plan when she overheard two men talking nearby. "Owen needs help out at his place," one man said, adjusting the packages in his arms. "Heard him mention it at the cattle auction last week. His housekeeper quit after his wife passed. Place has probably gone to ruin by now." "Owen Young," the other man replied. "That ranch is a good hour outside town. Heard he has become something of a hermit since Elizabeth died. Shame, really. They were good people." Georgia's heart quickened. She approached the men, her desperation overriding her natural shyness. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I could not help but overhear. Did you say someone needs help? A housekeeper position?" The first man, older with gray whiskers, looked her over with kind eyes. "Yes, miss. Owen Young runs a cattle ranch north of here. His wife died about 6 months back from fever. Their housekeeper left a month ago, said she could not stand how quiet and gloomy the place had become. Owen mentioned needing help, but I do not think he has done much about finding anyone." "How would I reach his ranch?" Georgia asked. "You would need a horse or a wagon. It is too far to walk, especially for a woman alone. The road can be dangerous." He paused, considering. "If you are serious about inquiring, Sam Weber makes a supply run out that way tomorrow morning. He might let you ride along. You can find him at the livery stable at first light." "Thank you," Georgia said, genuine gratitude warming her words. "Thank you so much." That night she lay in the narrow bed, listening to the sounds of Ogden settling into evening. Piano music drifted from the saloon, accompanied by occasional laughter and the low murmur of conversation. She thought about the rancher, Owen Young, and his quiet, gloomy house. She thought about his dead wife and wondered what kind of man he was. Mostly, she thought about the opportunity that might exist if she could convince him to hire her. Sleep came fitfully, and she woke before dawn, her body stiff from the hard mattress but her mind alert with purpose. She washed, tidied her hair as best she could without a proper brush, and made her way through the still dark streets to the livery stable. A man was already there, loading supplies into a sturdy wagon. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face and capable hands that moved efficiently through his work. "Mr. Weber," Georgia called out. He turned, surprise evident on his features. "That would be me. You are up early, miss." "My name is Georgia Foster. I was told you make a supply run to Owen Young's ranch this morning. I am hoping to inquire about a housekeeper position, and I was wondering if I might ride along with you." Sam Weber studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I suppose I do not see the harm in it. Owen could certainly use the help, though I will warn you, he has not been himself since Elizabeth passed. Good man, but grief does things to people. You climb up there when you are ready. We leave in 10 minutes. The journey took nearly 2 hours, following a rutted road that wound through rolling grassland dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The morning air was cool and clean, and as the sun rose higher, the landscape revealed itself in golden light. In the distance, mountains stood like sentinels, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer season. Sam Weber was not much for conversation, but he pointed out landmarks along the way. "That creek there is good water year-round. Owen's cattle come down to drink. Those hills to the east, that is where he grazes his herd in the summer months. He has got about 300 head, maybe more by now. Does all the work himself these days, with just a couple of hands who come during branding and roundup season." As they crested a low hill, the ranch came into view. It was a sprawling property with a main house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that held a few horses. The setting was beautiful, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it, but there was an air of neglect about the place. The front porch needed repairs. Weeds grew tall around the buildings, and one of the corral gates hung crooked on its hinges. A man emerged from the barn as the wagon approached. Even from a distance, Georgia could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone comfortable with physical labor. As they drew closer, she could make out more details. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed cutting, a beard that had grown beyond any intentional style, and eyes that were a striking blue even in the shadow of his hat brim. "Morning, Owen," Sam called out as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "Brought your supplies." "And a visitor." Owen Young approached, his gaze moving from Sam to Georgia with obvious confusion. "A visitor?" Georgia climbed down from the wagon before her courage could fail her. "Mr. Young, my name is Georgia Foster. I arrived in Ogden yesterday and I am looking for work. I heard you might need a housekeeper." Owen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or wariness. "Who told you that?" "Some men in town mentioned it. I have experience keeping house. I ran my family's home for years before." She paused, then continued, "Before circumstances brought me to Wyoming. I am a hard worker, Mr. Young. I can cook, clean, mend, tend a garden. Whatever you need." "I am not sure I am looking to hire anyone," Owen said, his voice rough from disuse or emotion. Georgia could not tell which. Sam Weber, who had been unloading crates from the wagon, spoke up. "Owen, no offense, but this place is falling apart around you. Your wife would not have wanted to see it like this. At least let the woman show you what she can do. If it does not work out, I will bring her back to town on my next run." Owen looked at his ranch as if seeing it through fresh eyes. His jaw tightened, and Georgia saw the grief that lived just beneath the surface of his stoic exterior. When he looked back at her, his expression had softened slightly. "I cannot pay much," he said. "Room and board and $20 a month." "That is more than fair," Georgia replied, relief flooding through her. "The housekeeper's room is off the kitchen. It is small but private. I expect meals at regular times, the house kept clean, laundry done weekly. I am out working most of the day, so you would be on your own for the most part." He paused, then added, "I am not looking for company or conversation, Miss Foster, just someone to keep the household running." "Is that understood?" "Perfectly understood, Mr. Young." He nodded once. "Then I suppose you have got a job. Sam, help me get these supplies inside, would you?" The interior of the house told the story of a man who had stopped caring about his surroundings. Dirty dishes were stacked in the kitchen. Dust covered every surface, and the floors needed a thorough scrubbing. The main room had a large stone fireplace, comfortable furniture that had seen better days, and windows that desperately needed washing. But beneath the neglect, Georgia could see that this had once been a warm, welcoming home. The housekeeper's room was indeed small, but it had a real bed with a proper mattress, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the creek. It was paradise compared to the boarding house room in town. After Sam departed with promises to return in 2 weeks, Georgia found herself alone with her new employer. Owen stood in the kitchen, looking uncomfortable, as if he was not sure what to do with her now that she was here. "I will start with the kitchen," Georgia said, breaking the awkward silence. "If you could show me where things are kept, where to get water, where the stores are, I can manage from there." He showed her around with economical gestures and few words. The pump was outside near the back door. The pantry, though not well organized, was adequately stocked with basics. The root cellar held potatoes, onions, and carrots. There were chickens in a coop behind the house, though the coop itself needed repairs. A smokehouse held preserved meat. "I usually eat at sunup, noon, and sundown," Owen said. "Simple food is fine. My wife used to make elaborate meals, but I am not expecting that." The mention of his wife hung in the air between them. Georgia simply nodded. "I will do my best, Mr. Young." He left without another word, and Georgia heard the door close behind him. Through the window, she watched him stride toward the barn, his shoulders set in a line of tension that spoke of a man carrying more weight than any physical burden could account for. She tied an apron she found hanging on a hook, filled a bucket with water from the pump, and set to work. By the time the sun began its afternoon descent, Georgia had made significant progress. The dishes were washed and put away, the kitchen table scrubbed clean, the floors swept. She had found flour, salt, and lard, and had biscuits baking in the oven along with a simple stew made from salt pork, potatoes, and carrots. It was nothing fancy, but it was hot and filling. When Owen came in at sundown, he stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, taking in the transformation. The surprise on his face was evident, though he tried to hide it. "Supper is ready," Georgia said, ladling stew into a bowl and placing it on the now clean table along with several biscuits. "There is coffee if you would like some." He removed his hat and washed his hands at the basin she had set up near the door for that purpose. When he sat down, he ate in silence, but she noticed he finished everything on his plate and took a second biscuit. "This is good," he said finally, the words seeming to cost him effort. "Thank you." "You are welcome, Mr. Young. You can call me Owen. Mr. Young was my father." "Then you may call me Georgia." He nodded, standing and placing his dishes in the basin. "I will be up early, breakfast at sunup. I will have it ready." He paused at the doorway, his back to her. "The house looks better already. I appreciate it." Then he was gone, climbing the stairs to what she assumed was his bedroom. Georgia finished cleaning up from supper, then retreated to her small room. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the creek babbling in the distance, an owl hooting from somewhere nearby, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not quite hope, but perhaps the possibility of it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Georgia woke before dawn, started the coffee, and prepared breakfast. Owen ate quickly and left for his work, returning at midday for a brief meal before heading out again until evening. He spoke little, but she noticed he was observing her, noting the steady improvements she made to the household. She scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, washed windows until they sparkled, beat the dust from curtains and rugs. She organized the pantry, mended clothes she found in a basket that had clearly been ignored for months, and weeded the kitchen garden that had become overgrown. One morning, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, she found a crate on the back porch. Inside were fabric, thread, needles, and a few other household items she had not asked for but certainly needed. Owen was in the barn, and when she went to thank him, he simply shrugged. "Sam mentioned you might need some things," seemed practical. It was very thoughtful. "Thank you, Owen." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude, changing the subject quickly. "The chicken coop needs repairs. I will get to it when I can." "I could do it," Georgia offered. "If you show me what needs to be done." He looked skeptical. "It is rough work. I grew up on a farm. I am familiar with rough work." That afternoon, he showed her what needed fixing, provided the tools and materials, and left her to it. By evening, the coop was secure and the chickens seemed more content. Owen inspected her work with a critical eye, then nodded his approval. "You did well," he said, and she felt an absurd amount of pride at the simple compliment. As the weeks passed, Georgia began to see glimpses beneath Owen's stoic exterior. She learned he had built this ranch from almost nothing, that he had married Elizabeth when he was 24 and she was 22, that they had been trying to start a family when the fever took her. She learned this not from Owen himself, but from Sam Weber, who visited every 2 weeks like clockwork and seemed pleased with how things were working out. "You have been good for him," Sam told her one day while Owen was showing him a problem with one of the barn beams. "He has started caring about the place again. That is something." Georgia was not sure how much credit she could take for that, but she had noticed small changes. Owen had trimmed his beard into something more intentional. He had fixed the crooked gait without being asked. He occasionally made small comments during meals, brief observations about the weather or the cattle, nothing deeply personal, but more than his initial silence. One evening in late August, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Georgia was preparing supper when the wind picked up, sending dust swirling through the yard. Owen came in earlier than usual, his expression concerned. "This is going to be a big one," he said. "Make sure all the windows are secured. I need to check on the horses." The storm hit with sudden fury. Rain pounded the roof, and lightning split the sky in brilliant flashes followed by thunder that shook the house. Georgia had secured all the windows and lit lamps against the early darkness when she heard a sound that did not belong to the storm. A cry, distant but distinct. She went to the window and peered out into the deluge. At first, she saw nothing, but then another flash of lightning illuminated the yard, and she saw Owen near one of the corrals. He appeared to be struggling with something, and in the next flash, she saw a horse had gotten out and was panicking in the storm. Without thinking, Georgia grabbed a coat and ran outside. The rain soaked her instantly, cold and driving. She could barely see through the downpour, but she made her way toward where she had seen Owen. "Georgia, get back inside." His voice barely carried over the storm, but she had already seen the problem. The horse was tangled in a section of downed fence, and Owen was trying to free it while also trying to calm the terrified animal. Georgia approached from the other side, speaking in low, soothing tones she had used with her own family's horses years ago. "Easy now, easy," she called softly, reaching out slowly to touch the horse's neck. "We are here to help you." The horse's eyes rolled white with fear, but Georgia's touch seemed to have some effect. It stopped thrashing long enough for Owen to free the tangled lead rope from the broken fence. "I have got him," Owen shouted. "Go open the barn door." Georgia ran to the barn, fighting against the wind to pull the heavy door open. Owen led the horse inside, and together they got the animal into a stall. Only then did they stop, both breathing hard, both drenched to the skin. "You should not have come out in that," Owen said, but there was no anger in his voice. "You could have been hurt." "So could you," Georgia replied. "The horse was panicking. He needed calm from more than one direction." Owen looked at her for a long moment, water dripping from his hair, his eyes intense in the dim light of the barn. "You did well out there. Thank you." They ran back to the house through the continuing storm. Inside, Georgia's teeth were chattering, and she realized Owen was shivering too despite his heavy coat. "You should get into dry clothes," she said. "I will make hot coffee." "You need to change too," he replied. "I will get the fire built up. Change first, then coffee." In her small room, Georgia peeled off her wet clothes and dressed in her only other outfit, a simple brown dress that was worn but dry. When she emerged, Owen had changed as well and was building up the fire in the main room. The warmth was welcoming after the cold rain. She made coffee and brought 2 cups to the fireplace. Without discussing it, they both sat on the floor near the hearth, drawn by the warmth and perhaps by something else, a shift in the distance that had existed between them. "You were good with that horse," Owen said, wrapping his hands around the hot cup. Where did you learn that? My father raised horses along with crops, Georgia said. I grew up around them. We were never wealthy, but we had good horses. My father said a person could tell a lot about someone by how they treated animals. He was right about that. Owen was quiet for a moment, then added, I am sorry you lost your family's farm. Sam told you, he mentioned you had come west after some hardships. I did not press for details. Georgia found herself wanting to tell him, this man who had shown her kindness in his own quiet way. My parents died within a year of each other. My mother first from pneumonia, then my father from a broken heart, I think, as much as from the injury that took him. My brother and I tried to keep the farm going, but we had debts we did not know about. The bank took everything. My brother went to California to find gold, said he would send for me when he struck it rich. That was almost a year ago. I have not heard from him since. So you came to Wyoming. I came west hoping to find him, or at least find work. I made it as far as Ogden before I ran out of money and options. She smiled slightly, though there was sadness in it. I traded my mother's locket for 2 weeks at the boarding house. It was the last thing I had of value. Owen was quiet, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was low. I know what it is like to lose everything that matters. When Elizabeth died, I thought about giving up this place, just walking away from it all. It did not seem to mean anything without her. But then I realized that would dishonor what we built together. She loved this ranch. She had dreams for it. She would be proud of what you have maintained, Georgia said softly. I let it fall apart after she was gone. You are the one who brought it back to life. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw grief still, but also something else. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. I am glad you came here, Georgia. I am glad Sam brought you that day. So am I, she replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The storm raged outside, but inside, beside the fire, something had shifted between them. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts, their losses, their small hopes for the future. It was the most Owen had spoken since she had arrived, and Georgia felt as if she was seeing the man he had been before grief had built walls around him. When they finally retired to their separate rooms, Georgia lay awake, replaying the evening in her mind. The way Owen had looked at her beside the fire, the way his voice had softened when he spoke, the feeling that they had moved from employer and employee to something else, something she was afraid to name but could not deny feeling. The morning brought clear skies and the fresh smell of rain-washed earth. At breakfast, Owen seemed almost shy, as if uncertain how to navigate this new territory between them. I thought I would ride out to check on the herd today, he said. Make sure they weathered the storm all right. You could come along if you wanted. The ride would do you good and you should see more of the ranch. Georgia's heart lifted. I would like that very much. He saddled 2 horses, a gentle mare for Georgia and his own sturdy gelding. As they rode across his land, Owen pointed out features of the ranch, telling her about his plans for expansion, his hopes for improving the herd. He spoke with an animation she had not heard before, and she realized he was sharing his dreams with her, letting her into a part of himself he had kept locked away. The cattle were fine, grazing peacefully in the hills. They stopped at a high point that offered a sweeping view of the valley, the mountains beyond, and the winding creek that gave the ranch its water. It is beautiful here, Georgia said, taking in the vista. Elizabeth and I used to ride up here often, Owen replied. She said it was like being able to see our whole future spread out before us. He paused, then added quietly, I have not been back since she died. I could not face it alone. Georgia understood what he was saying, what he was not saying. You are not alone now. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw in his face the struggle between holding on to grief and allowing himself to feel something new, Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. "No," he said. "I am not alone now." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, but everything had changed. The awareness between them was electric, undeniable. Georgia knew she was falling in love with this quiet, wounded man who showed his care through actions rather than words, who was learning to trust again, to hope again. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened in countless small ways. Owen began taking his meals at the kitchen table instead of eating quickly and leaving. He taught Georgia to ride better, taking her on tours of different parts of the ranch. She learned he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt comfortable, that he loved reading and had a collection of books in the main room that had gone untouched for months. She began reading aloud in the evenings while he did small repairs or went over his accounts, and though he said little about it, she noticed he always stayed in the room while she read, listening intently. One afternoon in September, Georgia was in the kitchen garden, harvesting vegetables for preserving, when she heard a rider approaching. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a man she did not recognize heading toward the house. He was well dressed for traveling, with a fine horse and good equipment. Owen emerged from the barn, and the man dismounted, greeting him with a handshake. They spoke for several minutes, too far away for Georgia to hear, but she noticed Owen's body language become tense. When he glanced toward the house and saw her watching, he said something to the visitor and they both walked toward her. "Georgia, this is Thomas Gaines," Owen said, his voice carefully neutral. "He is a land speculator from Denver. Mr. Gaines, this is Miss Georgia Foster, my housekeeper." "A pleasure, Miss Foster," Gaines said, tipping his hat. He was a handsome man in his 30s with confident bearing and expensive clothes. "Mr. Gaines has made an offer to buy my ranch," Owen continued, and Georgia's heart dropped. "He represents a cattle company looking to expand into Wyoming Territory." "It is a generous offer," Gaines added. "More than fair market value. I have been trying to purchase this property for some time. The location is ideal for our purposes." Georgia looked at Owen, trying to read his expression. "Are you considering it?" "I told Mr. Gaines I would give him an answer by the end of the month," Owen replied. "He is staying in Ogden for a few days if I decide to discuss it further." After Gaines departed, Georgia found Owen in the barn, brushing down his horse with more force than necessary. "Are you really thinking about selling?" she asked from the doorway. He did not stop brushing. "It is a good offer, more money than this place is probably worth. But this is your home. You and Elizabeth built this together. She is gone, Georgia." His voice was sharp, pain breaking through. "She has been gone for 8 months. Maybe it is time to accept that and move on." "Is that what selling would be, moving on, or would it be running away?" Owen stopped, his hand frozen mid-stroke. "You do not understand." "Then help me understand." Georgia moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Talk to me, Owen. Do not shut me out." He set down the brush and turned to face her, his expression raw. "I see her everywhere here. In the house, in the garden, riding these trails. Sometimes I wake up and for a moment I forget she is gone, and then I remember and it is like losing her all over again. Maybe if I left, went somewhere new, it would not hurt so much." "Or maybe," Georgia said softly, "the hurt would follow you because grief does not care about location. It cares about the heart, and yours is broken. But Owen, broken things can heal. Not by running away, but by giving them time, by letting new things grow alongside the memories." "New things like what?" She stepped closer, close enough to touch him, though she did not yet. "Like friendship, like purpose, like hope that the future might hold good things again." "Like us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replied. "Like us." Owen reached out and cupped her face in his calloused hand, his thumb gently brushing her cheek. "I am falling in love with you, Georgia. It terrifies me. I loved Elizabeth so completely, and losing her nearly destroyed me. I do not know if I can survive that kind of loss again." "Love always carries that risk," Georgia said, covering his hand with hers. "But the alternative is to close yourself off, to never feel anything again. That is not living, Owen. That is just existing." "I do not want to just exist anymore," he said. "I want to live. I want to feel again. I want you." He kissed her then, gently at first, then with growing intensity, all the emotion he had been holding back pouring into that single connection. Georgia kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, feeling safe and cherished and desired all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I will tell Gaines the ranch is not for sale," he said. "This is our home, our future." "Our future," Georgia repeated, loving the sound of those words. That evening they sat together in the main room, Georgia in Owen's arms as they watched the fire burn low. They talked about everything and nothing, making plans, sharing dreams. Owen spoke about expanding the herd, building a larger barn, perhaps hiring a few permanent hands to help with the work. Georgia talked about improving the garden, maybe getting some pigs, definitely fixing up the house more. "We could add a room," Owen suggested. "In a few years we might need the space." "For children?" Georgia asked, her heart quickening. "If you want them, if you will stay, if you will marry me." He shifted so he could look into her eyes. "I know I am not much for pretty words, and I know I come with a lot of painful memories. But I love you, Georgia Foster. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Joy flooded through her, so intense it almost hurt. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her again, and she felt the last of his walls crumble. This was a man who had learned to love again, who was choosing hope over despair, who was ready to embrace the future instead of hiding from it. They were married in early October, at the small church in Ogden, with Sam Weber standing as witness along with Mrs. Hutchinson, and a handful of townspeople who had come to know and respect them both. Georgia wore a new dress that Owen had insisted on buying, a lovely blue that matched the Wyoming sky. Owen wore his best suit and looked almost uncomfortable in anything other than his work clothes, but his eyes shone with happiness. The preacher kept the ceremony simple, speaking about love and commitment, about building a life together through both joy and hardship. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Georgia with such tenderness that several of the ladies present dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The celebration afterward was modest but heartfelt. Mrs. Hutchinson had made a cake, and Sam had brought bottles of decent wine. People shared stories and offered their best wishes, and Georgia felt embraced by this small community that had once been completely foreign to her. As the sun began to set, Owen and Georgia rode back to their ranch, to their home. The journey that had once seemed so long now felt too short, both of them eager to begin their life together in earnest. That night, in the bedroom that Owen had spent weeks preparing, taking down old curtains and putting up new ones, repairing furniture and making everything fresh, they came together as husband and wife. Owen was gentle and patient, mindful that this was Georgia's first time, but there was passion too, a connection that went beyond the physical to something deeper, something that bound their souls as well as their bodies. Afterward, lying in Owen's arms, Georgia thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had lost everything, had traded her last possession for shelter in a strange town, had nearly given up hope. But somehow, miraculously, she had found not just shelter but a home. Not just survival but love, not just a reason to stay but a reason to build a future. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, running his fingers through her hair. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Georgia replied. "How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things. If I had not lost everything, I would never have come to Wyoming. I would never have found you." "I think about that too," Owen admitted. "If Elizabeth had not died, if the housekeeper had not left, you would have passed right through Ogden and I would never have known you existed. It feels wrong to be grateful for the circumstances that brought us together when they cost so much pain." "Maybe," Georgia said thoughtfully, "it is not about being grateful for the pain, but about recognizing that good things can grow from it. Your love for Elizabeth was real and good. My family's love for me was real and good. Those things shaped who we are. They made us capable of appreciating what we have now." Owen pulled her closer. "You are wise beyond your years, Mrs. Young." "Mrs. Young," Georgia repeated, smiling at the name that was now hers. "I rather like the sound of that." The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and deeper happiness than either had imagined possible. They worked side by side, improving the ranch, expanding the herd, making plans for the future. Owen hired 2 permanent hands, young men named Ben and Tom, who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the heavy work. Their presence meant Owen did not have to work from sunup to sundown, which meant more time with Georgia. Winter came early that year, with heavy snows that blanketed the valley in white. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading together, talking, simply enjoying each other's presence. Owen taught Georgia to play chess, and she taught him card games her father had shown her. They laughed more easily as time went on, the shadows of grief gradually receding into memory rather than constant pain. In February, Georgia realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Owen, choosing a quiet evening after supper when they were alone in the main room. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." The look of wonder and joy on Owen's face was something she would remember forever. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she was something precious and fragile. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he replied. "I am overwhelmed, terrified, and more grateful than I can express. You have given me so much, Georgia. You have given me back my life, and now you are giving me a family. I love you more than words can say." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring. Owen became even more protective, insisting Georgia rest more, hiring a woman from town to come help with the heavy housework. Georgia tolerated his fussing because she knew it came from love, though she insisted on maintaining her garden and doing the cooking she enjoyed. In late September, nearly a year after their wedding, Georgia went into labor. Owen sent Tom racing to town to fetch the midwife while he stayed with Georgia, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, offering what comfort he could through the long hours of labor. Their son was born just before dawn, his first cries greeting the rising sun. Owen wept openly when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, this tiny miracle with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's eyes. "He is perfect," Owen said, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Henry Michael Young, Henry after George's father and Michael after Owen's. The baby was healthy and strong, and watching Owen with his son, Georgia fell in love with her husband all over again. He was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor at night when Henry fussed, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. Sam Weber visited a few weeks after Henry's birth, bringing gifts and congratulations. "You two have done well for yourselves," he said, holding the baby with practiced ease. "I remember bringing Georgia out here that first time, both of you so wounded and wary, Look at you now. You have built something real here, something lasting." "We could not have done it without you," Georgia said warmly. "You took a chance bringing me here. You saw what we needed before we saw it ourselves." "I just drove the wagon," Sam replied with a smile. "You two did the rest. As Henry grew, so did the ranch." Owen's careful breeding program improved the herd's quality, and their cattle brought top prices at auction. They built the new barn Owen had planned, added rooms to the house, and hired more help. The ranch became known throughout the territory as one of the best-run operations around. When Henry was 2, Georgia became pregnant again. This time she carried twins, a surprise they did not discover until the babies were born on a snowy December night in 1881. A girl they named Rose Elizabeth, after the flowers Georgia loved and Owen's first wife, and another boy they named Samuel Thomas, after Sam Weber and Thomas being Georgia's father's middle name. Owen adapted to being outnumbered with good-natured resignation, and their house became filled with the chaos and joy of raising 3 young children. Henry was a serious, thoughtful child who followed his father everywhere. Rose was adventurous and bold, always getting into things she should not. Samuel was the happy, easy-going baby who smiled at everyone. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen and Georgia stood on the front porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Henry was teaching Rose how to skip stones in the creek while Samuel toddled between them, trying to keep up. "Do you ever think about that day you arrived?" Owen asked, his arm around Georgia's waist. "When Sam brought you here and you were so desperate for work that you would have done anything." "I think about it often," Georgia replied. "I think about trading my mother's locket for 2 weeks at a boarding house, not knowing where I would go or what I would do when that time ran out. I think about how scared I was." "I am sorry you lost the locket," Owen said. "I know how much it meant to you," Georgia smiled. "I lost one thing but gained everything that truly matters. That is more than a fair trade." "Still," Owen said, reaching into his pocket, "I thought you might like to have this." He opened his hand, and there in his palm was her mother's locket, the silver polished to a bright shine. Georgia gasped. Where did you?" "I have been searching for it for years," Owen explained. "I asked Sam to make inquiries every time he went to town. Last month, he finally tracked it down to a jewelry dealer in Cheyenne. It cost a fair amount to buy it back, but it belongs with you." Georgia took the locket with trembling hands, opening it to see her parents' painted portraits still safe inside. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at her husband. "This is the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever done for me," she said. "Thank you, Owen. Thank you so much. You gave up your last possession for a chance at a new life," Owen said, kissing her forehead. "You gave it up with courage and hope. I wanted you to have it back, to have something from your past to pass down to our children, to remember where you came from while celebrating where you are now." Georgia fastened the locket around her neck, where it settled against her heart. "Our children will know the story," she promised. "They will know about the woman who traded everything for shelter and the man who gave her a reason to stay forever." "I did not give you a reason to stay," Owen corrected gently. "We gave each other reasons. You saved me as much as I saved you." Henry called for them then, eager to show off Rose's first successful stone skip, and they walked down together to join their children. As they approached the creek, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds to paint everything in gold, Georgia reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. She had come to Wyoming Territory with nothing, a woman alone in a harsh world, her resources depleted and her hope nearly extinguished. She had traded her final valuable possession for temporary shelter, not knowing that decision would change her life forever. The rancher who had hired her, himself broken by loss and grief, had offered her more than a job. He had offered her a chance to build something new, something lasting. Together they had healed each other's wounds. Together they had created a home filled with love and laughter. Together they had built a future neither had dared to imagine possible in their darkest moments. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenges and joys. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in Wyoming Territory. Owen's reputation as a fair employer and skilled cattleman spread, and the young ranch became a training ground for young cowboys looking to learn the trade properly. Georgia became known throughout the region for her hospitality and kindness. She opened their home to travelers needing shelter, to pregnant women needing care, to anyone who found themselves in difficult circumstances. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure no one who came to her door was turned away hungry or without help. When Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, the young family celebrated with the rest of the territory. Henry was 11 by then, already showing signs of the man he would become, responsible and hardworking. Rose was 9, a fierce and independent girl who could ride better than most of the ranch hands. Samuel was 9 as well, though younger than his twin by 20 minutes, creative and gentle-natured, always drawing or inventing stories. 2 more children had joined the family. Another daughter, Lily Grace, born when the twins were 4, and a second son, James Owen, born 2 years after that. The house that had once been too quiet now rang with voices and footsteps and all the beautiful noise of a large, happy family. As Georgia approached her 40th birthday, she sometimes stood at the window and watched her family with a sense of profound gratitude that never diminished. Owen, now in his mid-40s, still ran the ranch with the same dedication he had always shown, though he delegated more to their older sons and trusted employees. His dark hair was now threaded with silver, and lines of laughter had replaced some of the grief lines that had marked his face when they first met. One evening, after the younger children were in bed and the older ones occupied with their own activities, Owen and Georgia sat together on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "I have been thinking," Owen said, taking her hand, "about expanding. Not the ranch, but our impact. I want to start a program to help young people learn ranching and animal husbandry. Kids who might not otherwise have opportunities. Orphans, kids from difficult circumstances. We have the resources, the space, the knowledge. What do you think?" Georgia squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with love for this man who never stopped growing, never stopped caring. "I think it is a wonderful idea. I think it is exactly the kind of legacy we should be building." They launched the program the following spring. Young people came from across Wyoming and neighboring territories, some staying for a season, others for years. They learned not just ranching skills but life skills, and many went on to start their own successful operations. Owen and Georgia became known as people who gave others the chances they themselves had been given, who understood that sometimes people just needed someone to believe in them. Henry grew into a fine young man and, at 20, married a sweet girl from Ogden named Sarah. They built a house on the ranch property, and Henry became his father's partner in running the operation. Rose shocked everyone by becoming a teacher, insisting on going east for education before returning to open a school in Ogden. Samuel became an artist, his paintings of Western life eventually earning recognition beyond Wyoming's borders. Lily Grace followed in her mother's footsteps, learning everything she could about healing and midwifery, eventually serving the community as a skilled medical practitioner. James, the youngest, became a lawyer, though he chose to practice in Wyoming rather than seeking fortune in a big city, saying his purpose was to help protect the land and people he loved. On Georgia and Owen's 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, the family gathered for a celebration. All their children were there, along with grandchildren, the first generation born fully into this legacy of love and second chances. Sam Weber, now an old man but still sharp as ever, attended as the honored guest. 25 years, Sam said in his speech, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. 25 years ago, I made a supply run to this ranch and brought along a young woman desperate for work. I thought I was just giving someone a ride. I had no idea I was helping to create all of this. He gestured to encompass not just the family but the thriving ranch, the young people they had helped, the community they had built. Georgia and Owen Young are proof that sometimes our worst moments lead to our greatest blessings. They are proof that love can heal, that hope can sustain, and that two people committed to building something good can create ripples that extend far beyond their own lives. Later that night, after all the guests had departed and the house had grown quiet, Georgia and Owen lay in their bed, holding each other in the comfortable way of long married couples who know each other completely. "You have any regrets?" Georgia asked. "Anything you would change?" Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret the pain I went through losing Elizabeth. I regret the grief that brought us together because grief is a terrible thing. But I do not regret a single moment since you walked into my life. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had forgotten how. You gave me a family, a purpose, joy I thought I would never feel again. If I could change the past, I would not, because it might mean losing this, losing you, and that is unthinkable." "I feel the same way," Georgia said. "I lost my parents, my home, everything I knew. The journey to get here was painful, but every step led me to you, to this life, to these children and grandchildren. I would walk that hard road again if I knew it would bring me here." As they drifted off to sleep, Georgia's hand found the locket she still wore, now holding not just her parents' portraits, but tiny painted images of Owen and their children. The locket that had once been her last possession, traded for shelter, had been returned to her as a symbol of what they had built together. The years continued their steady march. Owen and Georgia grew old together, their love deepening rather than diminishing with time. They watched their children raise families of their own, watched the ranch continue to thrive under Henry's management, watched the programs they had started help dozens. Then hundreds of young people find their way in the world. In the spring of 1915, on a particularly beautiful morning with wildflowers blooming across the valley and the mountains standing sharp against a clear blue sky, Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand clasped in George's. He was 62 years old, and he had lived long enough to see 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. His last words, spoken the night before, were, "I love you, Georgia. Thank you for giving me such a beautiful life." Georgia grieved deeply, but without the despair that might have consumed her. She had learned from Owen that love does not end with death, that the bonds formed in life continue beyond it. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by family, still active in the community, still helping those who needed it, still sharing the story of how she had come to Wyoming with nothing and found everything. When Georgia died in 1923 at the age of 67, it was peacefully, in the same house where she had lived for 45 years, in the same bed where she had slept beside her beloved husband. Her children and many of her grandchildren were with her. Her last words were about the locket, which she pressed into Rose's hand. "Keep this safe," she whispered. "Remember the story. Remember that sometimes losing everything is just making room for something better. Remember that love is worth every risk, and that home is not a place, but the people who make you feel you belong. The funeral brought people from across Wyoming and beyond. Former ranch hands, now running their own successful operations. Young people who had been through the training programs Owen and Georgia had started. Families who had been helped in times of crisis. The church could not hold everyone who came to pay respects, and they overflowed into the street. Rose, giving the eulogy, spoke about her mother's courage, her kindness, her unwavering belief that people deserved second chances. She told the story, which had become legend in the family, of how Georgia Foster had arrived in Wyoming Territory with nothing but a locket, how she had traded it for shelter, and how the rancher who hired her had given her not just a job but a reason to stay forever. "My parents taught us that love is a choice made new each day," Rose said, her voice strong despite her tears. "They taught us that family is built through commitment and care, not just blood. They taught us that when you have been given much, you have a responsibility to give back. These lessons are their legacy, and they will live on through all of us who loved them." The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations. The house was preserved, becoming something of a landmark, a testament to the love story that had begun there. The programs Owen and Georgia had started continued, evolving with the times but maintaining their core mission of giving opportunities to those who needed them. Georgia's locket became a treasured family heirloom, passed down through the women of the family, each one learning the story of the woman who had traded her last possession for shelter and found instead a home, a family, and a love that transformed not just her life but the lives of countless others. The story of Owen and Georgia Young became more than just family history. It became a reminder that endings can lead to beginnings, that loss can make space for new love, that courage in the face of desperation can open doors to futures we cannot imagine. It became a testament to the idea that sometimes the things we lose are simply clearing the path for the things we are meant to find. In the end, Georgia had not traded her locket for 2 weeks of shelter. She had traded it for a lifetime of love, for children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, for a legacy that would extend far beyond her years. She had traded it for a partnership that healed 2 broken hearts, for a home built on mutual respect and deepening affection, for the chance to help others the way she had been helped. And Owen, the rancher who had nearly given up on life after losing his first love, had been given the gift of Georgia's presence. She had reminded him that the heart's capacity for love is not diminished by loss but expanded by it, that honoring the past does not mean refusing the future, that joy can coexist with memory. Their love story was not one of instant passion or dramatic gestures. It was built slowly, carefully, through shared work and quiet moments, through choosing each other day after day, through building a life together one decision at a time. It was a love story suited to the West, practical and enduring, rooted in the land and the life they created together. The ranch they built, the family they raised, the people they helped, all of it stemmed from that first meeting when a desperate woman arrived seeking only survival, and a grieving man offered more than either of them realized. From that meeting grew something that outlasted them both, a legacy of love and second chances that rippled outward through time. Years turned into decades, and the West changed around the ranch that Owen and Georgia had built. Towns grew into cities, territories became states, the old ways gave way to new. But the young ranch remained, a constant in a changing world, still run by their descendants, still embodying the values they had established. On the 100th anniversary of Georgia's arrival at the ranch, the family gathered for a celebration. Over 200 people attended, all descended from or connected to Owen and Georgia Young. They came from across the country, from all walks of life, united by the legacy of two people who had found each other in their darkest moments and built something that lasted. The locket was there, displayed in a place of honor, still containing the portraits of Georgia's parents, still bearing the marks of Georgia's fingers from all the time she had held it. Someone had added an engraving on the back, words that Georgia had spoken often in her later years. Home is where love gives you a reason to stay. As the sun set over the Wyoming mountains that evening, painting the sky in the same golds and purples that had colored so many evenings for Owen and Georgia, their descendants stood together, looking out over the land that had witnessed a love story for the ages. It had started with a trade, a last possession given up in desperation. It had continued with an offer of employment that became an offer of partnership, then love, then a lifetime together. It had created a family, a legacy, and a reminder that the human capacity for love and renewal is boundless. Georgia had traded her last possession for shelter. Owen had given her a reason to stay forever. And together, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the transformative power of love, second chances, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secure. And in the hearts of all who knew their story, the message remained clear. That love is always worth the risk, that home is always worth building, and that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding what you were meant to have all along.